Okay, so in the very last video, I was having failure with this thing, and I tried all the different RAM slots, like these two together, and these two together. Also, I had thought this thing took 8 gigs of RAM, even though the motherboard shows 8 gigs of RAM in the BIOS. Supposedly, according to the manual, this only takes a maximum of 4 gigs, with populating across the board with 4 1 gig sticks. So that's weird. I don't know. Supposedly, also, it doesn't support 2 gig stick DIMMs as well. This is a very strange motherboard, because it also has other kinds of specifications about what it would work with as far as RAM is concerned. But this RAM here, this Corsair RAM right here, is what came with it originally. It's only 512 megabyte sticks, and obviously 1 gig isn't really enough for much at all. It'll run Windows XP, sure, but that really wasn't what my intent was. I mean, even still, that's like for some of the really old games that I was considering slapping on this. Yeah, I mean, it's still enough RAM, whatever. I mean, whatever. Anyhow, I swapped back to the original graphics card as opposed to what was in here before, which was the GTX 550 Ti. The reason why I'm swapping back to this one is because I realized that this motherboard does need a BIOS update. And in another video earlier, in a previous video, I had stated that I couldn't find the right BIOS for this, and that shortly after stating that, I ended up actually finding BIOS that go higher than what's on here now. The issue that I'm running into is that it will only update BIOS via a floppy. There's a little floppy connector down there. Okay, yeah. So that process poses me a bit of an issue of getting the updating the BIOS. It's a bit of a problem. So that being said, because of the particular BIOS that's on here, it doesn't even support the dual, the Pentium D 820. That even though that is in the specified list of supported CPUs, it still needs a BIOS update to even take this processor. So that's 2 processors I've tried in here that both show up in the BIOS but don't actually work properly. So now what I need to do is probably pull this entire motherboard out, slap it into a really old case, get it connected to a floppy, and attempt to update the BIOS and come back to this whole process. Yeah, so that's where we are here. What I'm going to do now is swap back the original CPU that was in here, the Pentium 4 3 gig processor. And I don't know, see if maybe once you've got that in, if I can maybe get Windows 10 to install on here on a Pentium 4, just to see what happens. And then once I've gotten some success with this machine, at the very least, then I'll worry about updating the BIOS and stuff like that. In this current configuration, once I put the old processor back in, and in that configuration with the hard drive that's here connected now, that's Windows XP, all basically with the original hardware coming out of that old case. If I can't boot into Windows then obviously there's an issue going on with the motherboard that maybe it's why they were trying to get rid of it. I don't know. Because here, like I said, I have been having some quote-unquote success with this motherboard. I mean, it does turn on. I do get into the BIOS. It reads the RAM. It reads the processor. So the only thing that comes to mind is clearly it needs a BIOS update. So yeah, what I'm going to do now is put the Pentium 4 back in, which means, of course, pulling this entire bracket off, because you can't even open this. You can't even open this up, like, the latch, because this is in the way. So now I got to pull this whole thing off and put the old processor back in, put the heat sink back on, and I can go from there. And I mean, that's the other reason why I put this original graphics card back in is because I know it works, and with a Pentium 4 processor, I really don't see the point in having a 550 Ti connected to it. I mean, there's going to be enough of a bottleneck already with the old hardware as it is. You know, 1 gig RAM, old Pentium 4. So, I mean, this 256 megabyte card, which I'm pretty sure that it is, it might be 128, but I think it's 256. Anyways, this card should be able to run some of those old games anyhow. And then I'll worry about updating the hardware, the motherboards, CPU, and the graphics card after I've gotten the BIOS updated, which again means pulling everything out of here, because there's no way for me to currently just slap one in here. So I'll be back with another video after I've gotten this, I don't know, maybe at least running Windows XP at the very minimum, and then we'll just kind of go from there. Thanks for watching. Okay, so I installed the original CPU that was on that motherboard. I also installed the original RAM, and you know, as you see here, the machine, you know, it is working. It's that one that I've been, you know, messing around with for a bit here. So my plan is to try to upgrade the CPU to as high as possible that this motherboard can support, and the same with the RAM. Strange thing is, though, as I've said once before, is that even though the manual says the motherboard only supports 4 gigs of RAM, I've actually stuck in 8 gigs and it showed up here. It said total 8 gigs. So I don't know. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to use this CD-ROM connected outside the box, because there's no CD-ROM in the front, and this motherboard does not support booting from USB. And yeah, so let's see what happens when I go to install the operating system. Now, I already told the BIOS to boot the CD-ROM first. So it should boot to that CD-ROM drive. My understanding is that this motherboard supports an E6700. But I accidentally bought a 7600 and I installed it in there and it showed up in the motherboard. I don't know, very strange. This is also the very first time that it's ever sat there on that screen for so long. Oh, there goes the drive. Alright, well, let's see what happens here. So yeah, as I was saying, I installed an E7600 and the motherboard it showed up on the motherboard. It like quote-unquote worked. And the same thing with 8 gigs of RAM. Supposedly it only supports 4. I don't know, it's very bizarre. But I'm basically going to attempt to install the highest CPU and the highest amount of RAM that that motherboard supports, and upgrade it to, you know, an older, new gaming machine. Oh, something's happening. Let's take a look at the computer here. This is gonna have fans. This is gonna have fans on the top of it. They're not there right now. Right there's another computer that I'm working on. I'll show that one off at another time. Oh, it's still sitting there. Nothing's happening. Oh, oh. Oh, 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 oh. Oh. It just restarted. Yeah, I don't... Okay. So anyways, yeah, that's another computer that I'm working on. That has an AMD in it. It has 2 graphics cards. I'll show it off another time. Let's see, here we go. Again. Going to the drive. I imagine that this is not really all that entertaining, and I apologize for that. But we'll get to see together, you know, what's going to happen. I mean, it's attempting to boot to the OS installation media, but I mean, you saw what I mean. You did see there that the little spinny thing came up for a moment, and then it restarted. It was just kind of weird. Excuse me. I suppose it's possible there's something wrong with this drive, which that would really suck, and I really hope not. So yeah, when everything is all finally finished, I'll be putting in a red, blue, red fan that were up there originally. You're going to be replacing those. Oh wow, going on 7 minutes here. Come on. I don't know why it's taking so long. I mean, other than the fact that it's really old hardware. Oh, 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 there it goes. There it goes. There, no, oh. It just doesn't want to do it. Okay. Well. Alright then. I'm going to have to try a different... I think what I'm going to do is burn a different CD. Because the drive is working. I'll be back soon.